Hey, what's going on, guys? What's happening? YouTube, you guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about how the gig economy may never be the same following the Modello cough. I saw an article on the Motley Fool, fool.com, titled "The Modello cough response could forever change how Amazon, Uber, and others utilize contract workers." And there might be a lot of things about life and society and work that are never going to be the same after we get past this Modello cough. One thing that almost certainly won't be the same is the gig economy. The gig economy, companies like Uber, Lyft, Postmates, etc., these things have been kind of being contested for quite some time now. This is really nothing new. For the past year, if not longer, California and other states have been forcing companies like Uber to classify their gig workers as employees. One kind of odd or interesting or ironic thing about this is most gig economy workers don't actually want to be employees. It's kind of funny that the loudest voices against the gig economy workers being contractors are people who aren't actually in the gig economy. I've seen a couple studies done, surveys done, and the results tend to be on the low end, 70% of gig workers don't want to be classified as employees. On the high end, as many as 94% of gig economy workers don't want to be classified as employees. I think what most people tend to love about the gig economy is the autonomy and the flexibility. People like the fact that they can decide not to work for a week or a month and then just open an app, press a button, and start making money. People like that if they're having a bad day, they can just say, "I'm done for the day," and turn the app off. People like that they can drive in whatever area they want to drive. And as soon as gig economy workers become employees as opposed to contractors, a lot of that flexibility is going to go away. If Uber or Postmates or whatever else is paying you an hourly salary, if they're providing you with benefits, if they're providing you with insurance, you better believe that they're going to tell you when to work, how long to work for, where to work, etc. So that's why most gig economy workers don't want this. I do think we kind of have somewhat of a societal problem where a lot of jobs that shouldn't be classified as the gig economy is turning into the gig economy or turning into contract workers. And maybe we need to look at some type of scenario where businesses of a certain size are required to treat contractors as employees. I think for people like you and me, right, entrepreneurs trying to start up an e-commerce business, trying to start up an agency, trying to start up a service business, the fact that we can hire contract workers and we're not beholden to an employee, we don't have to offer benefits. When you're starting out with not a lot of money, contractors can be incredibly beneficial to your business. At a certain point, though, as long as health insurance and benefits are going to be tied to jobs, I don't think we want to wind up in a scenario where all these companies start turning their quote-unquote jobs into contractor positions, and now nobody's got benefits anymore, right? And companies like Google and Amazon and a lot of other companies are kind of walking this line. But anyhow, I think I've kind of laid out the scenario well enough. Like I said, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, so drop your comments down below. But let's get on into this article. Again, the article is titled "The Modello Cough Response Could Forever Change Amazon, Uber, and Others Utilize Contract Workers." Too many gig workers didn't have a safety net in place when they needed it most, setting the stage for more protection in the future. And one of the things that's really kind of bringing this to the forefront is that the government, in an unprecedented way, something that's never been done before, has actually extended support, money, unemployment to gig workers and freelancers. The article starts by saying, "In some regards, it's a bit premature to talk about what life will be like after the Modello cough." Nope, of course, we're running out of battery, right? "In some regards, it's a bit premature to talk about what life will be like after the Modello outbreak finally abates. After all, it's still growing on a global basis. First things first, the reality of the matter is, however, it's not too soon to think about these things. The market tends to be predictive rather than reactive, meaning the stocks of companies that will snap out of Modello cough funk before others could begin their rebounds before the contagion is completely in the rearview mirror. The world's commerce landscape will emerge at least a little bit different, of course. If nothing else, employees and employers will take sanitation a little more seriously, but perhaps the biggest shakeup stemming from the Modello cough wake-up call is the use of contract workers at companies like Amazon and Uber that have come to... man, that was odd phrasing. Okay, so basically they're saying Amazon and Uber have come to rely on contract workers. The federal government's recent $2 trillion stimulus package bailed them out too. But from a legal and technical perspective, they shouldn't have needed to. Those contracted or quote unquote gig workers caught a break. It's unlikely they or the government want to put themselves in the same spot again. That's a lot of people. It's hardly a new debate, but it's a debate that's come to a head in just the past year. Are Uber drivers effectively employees, even if they are contractors on paper? Should the more than 100,000 contractors and temp workers utilized by Alphabet be classified as employees if they're expected to do the same kind of work to do the same type of work in the same place as employees? Historically, the answer has been no. Historically, though, 1/30 of USA workforce hasn't been considered a gig worker. Take that number with a grain of salt, though. Nobody seems to know the exact proportion of the working population considered contractors. Gig economy's data aggregated numbers put the number somewhere between 25 and 30%, though the Government Accountability Office analysis General Society survey suggests that the number is closer to 40% when counting part-time side gigs. At the other end of the spectrum, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says only about 1/10 of U.S. contractors rely on contract work as their primary source of income. And I think that's one important distinction. I don't think gig economy work should be or was ever intended to be full-time work. The gig economy, I would have loved if something like Uber was around when I was in college. If I needed some money to go out Friday night, and I could just turn on an app, hop in my car, and go make $25, I would have done that in a second. There were times that I couldn't go home for a holiday break because I didn't have any gas money to put in the car. If I could have thrown on an app a couple days before and made some gas money to be able to go home, I would have most certainly done that. If your roommate moves out 5 days before rent is due and doesn't pay their $600 portion of the rent, it would be awesome to be able to hop in the car for a couple hours, make that money, and be able to make rent. Like, to me, that's what the gig economy was intended for. It wasn't really intended for people to try to make a full-time living. And I think a lot of people realize that they shouldn't be or can't make a full-time living off of it. But people who were doing Uber back when the times were good and you could actually make a full-time income out of it, they're kind of banging their heads into the wall nowadays, and they don't want to accept the fact that they may have to go back to a traditional job. Regardless, that's still millions of people being subject to the whims of their effective employer, working without the safety net of unemployment insurance. Companies broadly explain how the use of contractors reflects the ever-changing work environment. Such arrangements give them the flexibility they need, and there may be some truth to the idea. There's certainly an incentive for a company to promote these work relationships. However, when an arrangement offloads costs like payroll taxes, health benefits, and vacation pay to the worker, bookkeeping service Pilot estimates that retaining an actual employee can cost around 1/3 more than a contractor paid at the same base compensation rate, a difference ultimately offset at the worker's expense. For drivers of ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft, expenses like gas and auto maintenance make the gig relationship even less rewarding. And I think we kind of need to strike a balance. I think we maybe need to look at larger companies of X number of $1 million a year in profits, larger companies who have, over 500 workers, whatever it may be. Maybe we be a little bit more stringent on them having to classify contractors as workers, whereas small businesses who kind of need the flexibility and the lower cost of contract workers to actually get off the ground, somebody like you or me, starting an agency, starting an e-commerce business, I think would almost, it's almost impossible to hire employees right off the bat. Especially when you're kind of scaling up and you can't anticipate demand or you can't really provide enough hours for somebody. Contractors are key in situations like that. But for larger companies, it is kind of bad for society as a whole if everybody's being pushed off as a gig worker and not being given benefits and things like that. The article goes on to talk about the fallout's big finale. The fallout of these business relationships was taking shape even before the spread of the Modello cough threatened gig workers' paychecks. Amazon, for instance, had been named in multiple lawsuits related to the matter. In one, the e-commerce giant is accused of knowingly and willfully pressuring a contracted driver to exceed that driver's allotted driving hours for any given day, leading to a crash. Another claims a contracted delivery van driver, failed to yield as driving laws would require, putting a motorcycle rider in the hospital. Though Amazon contracted the company to do deliveries, the big blue Amazon logo on the side of the delivery van might make it difficult for a judge and jury to distinguish a meaningful difference. And it's not just Amazon in the crosshairs. California recently enacted legislation that dramatically narrows what constitutes a true contractor. requiring these workers to perform tasks that are outside of the company's core business. It's a ruling that hits companies like Uber and Grubhub where it hurts the most. Separately, last week, New York State Appellate Court effectively ruled that workers given assignments through an app are indeed employees and therefore could be offered traditional employee benefits. The company in question was a courier service, Postmates, but once again, technology names like Uber, Lyft, and Grubhub are implicated. That was also right around the same time that the federal government felt compelled enough to explicitly make contract and gig workers eligible to receive a share of the $2 trillion set aside as stimulus in the CARES Act that will hopefully abate some of the economic damage inflicted by the Modello cough shutdown. Before gig workers became relatively common, it's arguable such provision wouldn't have been added. Where to go from here? It's the last data nugget that may be the proverbial nail in the coffin for contract work as we know it. If the federal government must throw the financial lifeline to these workers because their employer can't do so when the economy is battered, then these organizations should arguably be contributing to unemployment insurance programs before black swan events like the beer cough contagion materialize. Don't be surprised to see the tide turn in a direction of going forward, supported by lawmakers, workers, and newly sympathetic consumers. In many global economic disasters, including the subprime mortgage meltdown, when they absolutely have to, regulators and lawmakers will do their best to avoid a repeat of a particular mistake. What the gig economy landscape will look like a year from now still isn't clear, of course, but given the legal wheels that were spinning even before the Modello cough outbreak changed everything, look for companies' labor costs to rise and prices to rise accordingly. Also, don't be surprised if it means fewer of these jobs remain available, though more of these remaining true employees will at least enjoy basic benefits. So the article kind of wraps up there. One of the things that I would hate to see happen, but almost surely will happen, the government's known for doing things, for overreaching, for having unintended consequences. And while I do think this is an issue that probably needs to be addressed, unfortunately, what I think is going to wind up happening is the cost of things will go up for everybody, right? Because the cost of things like Grubhub delivery and Uber rides isn't going to stay the same if these companies have to treat their contractors as employees. And another thing, I think these jobs that a lot of people actually like doing for the flexibility, I think a lot of these jobs will either go away entirely or a lot of the flexibility associated with these jobs will wind up going away. And people who relied on the gig economy for a little bit of extra income will not be able to get that income. So I think, unfortunately, this is going to hurt the gig economy. What I think really should happen is people should stop relying on the gig economy for a full-time income. And I've actually seen a lot of people say things like that. Uber should cap how many hours somebody can drive in a day. That way it will kind of naturally create more opportunities for more people without necessarily driving the prices down. But would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. Again, if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button below. And if you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next video.